Thank you, Margaret, for tonight's story. Father Simon and the Very, Very Forgiving Collective. I feel shame and embarrassment at even saying those words, dear Father Simon. As will become clear as my story unfolds, I seek forgiveness for a sin I committed all too recently. And for this reason, any identifying information about me must be concealed for fear of me being banished from my job and possibly my country.
Oh, this is good.
Hey, what?
I like this. Already I like this.
I work in the NHS in a job which, although very common, is pretty much widely unknown and definitely extremely unappreciated. I work in the community, visiting mainly people of a certain generation, and thus confusion over my job title is all too frequent. Over the years, I've become accustomed to being addressed as a nurse or a doctor. Now I don't bother to correct the uneducated or the confused soul addressing me as such, having previously made a confused situation even more confusing by attempting to explain my job title and what I do, which most of us in the profession still can't explain in less than 3,000 words. So I won't. One day I was visiting a new patient, let's just call her Betty, a very pleasant but hard of hearing and slightly confused elderly lady. As usual, I introduced myself and my job title, and after several shouty attempts, I believe she'd understood me sufficiently. I completed my assessment and left with lots of reassurances that I would be back the following week. It was unusual that a patient was quite so keen to see me again, but I put it down to the fact that our conversation had, despite the hearing difficulties, been pleasant, and that Betty had felt quite comfortable telling me her life story, which is not so unusual. The following week I arrived at Betty's house, and she rather enthusiastically greeted me with, "Ah, hello again, Sister Margaret. How lovely that you've come back to see me." My immediate thought was, oh, here we go again. I've been mistaken for the district nurse one more time. But I admit that the thought of more shouty attempts to explain my proper job, I can't really explain it succinctly enough, led me to smile politely and say, "It's always a pleasure, Betty." The following 3 or 4 visits passed, and Betty continued to refer to me as Sister Margaret, even though I was not carrying out any duties that could be considered even vaguely as nursing. And I continued to smile politely and made no attempt to correct her. One day I arrived, as usual, at Betty's house, only to be greeted by a woman who identified herself as Betty's daughter. I should explain at this point that I was born and brought up in one country of the UK, but now live and work in another country in the UK, and so my accent is always distinctive to those around me. She's been very, very careful about this. I said hello, and before I could introduce myself, Betty's daughter said, "Ah, Sister Margaret, thank you so much for coming. Mum so enjoyed your visits and was honoured that you took the time to spend with her, particularly she was never a great believer." And suddenly it dawned on me that Betty hadn't thought I was the district nurse, but in fact mistaken me for a nun. Again I smiled politely, squirming with the thought that I was now about to be found out as a fraud who let old people believe I was in religious orders. I know I should have come clean at that point, but thought that the explaining I had passed myself off as a nun because I was too lazy to explain to this lady's mother what my real job was would only make the situation far worse. Little was I to know that Betty's daughter, and as it happened the rest of Betty's large and extended family, had gathered at Betty's house because she had very suddenly and unfortunately passed away the previous night. Betty's daughter then ushered me into the living room where Betty was lying peacefully, surrounded by various relatives. Silence fell as I entered the room and all eyes were on me. Betty's daughter introduced me and then asked whether I could possibly say a few words.
Oh no.
Matt's head's in his hands, by the way, and has been for a while. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I was wondering," she replied, "if you could just say a small prayer and lead us all in some words, for my mother." Well, at this point, my upbringing as a vicar's daughter, previously the millstone around my neck, proved all too useful. And I muttered some vague prayer of thankfulness for Betty's life, asked the Almighty to perform his wonders, and gave thanks for the fact that Betty was now at peace. It was hardly pause for thought, but under the circumstances, not bad. I gave my condolences to the family, made my excuses about having other flock to attend to, and left very quickly, never to be seen by any member of Betty's friends and family. But Father Simon and team, I seek forgiveness, not from Betty, who was probably none the wiser, and who did seem to genuinely, thoroughly enjoy my visits. Not from Betty's family, even though they to this day believe that Betty was mysteriously befriended by a nun despite never having set foot in a church, but to the fellow members of my profession for cowardly ducking out of my duty and responsibility to explain my job and spread the word about the amazing work that we do, and instead be content with letting people believe I am a nurse. Yours in true reverence, Margaret, brackets not my real name. Well, thank you, Sister Margaret, for this. And as you didn't explain to us what your job was either, except that clearly you do very vital work, and it's clearly very important work, and those who you visit appreciate it very much, whatever they think your reason for doing it is. So Sister Margaret has sent in the confession. Let's see what we make of that. Bobby from the Priory is going first.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because she didn't intentionally mislead Betty, and as she said, it's very, very, very difficult in these circumstances sometimes to explain to some people. So sometimes it's easier just to do the job and then obviously move on. So I understand that. There was no intention. You didn't want to. You didn't gain from it. You didn't intend to kind of mislead someone. And also, at their time of need, when they were at a loss and all gathered around Betty, she was there and she could lead them as if. So I don't think anybody would really kind of not like her for that and not appreciate her for all the effort. The only problem, just a word of warning, of course, about, you know, the potential for misleading. It could have been messy. It could have been messy. So what I'm saying is, you are wholly forgiven, but just be careful when we mislead.
Be careful out there. Don't go pretending you're a nun, is what Bobby was saying.
Is what I'm saying,
That's
just because it could be worse.
Nigel, don't go around pretending you're a monk either. Don't get ideas. You're pretending to be an actor at the moment from the 50s. That's what I'd say.
Card-carrying equity actor. So,
what I like about this story is that it is. I always like the ones which could be an episode from a sitcom, and this is like classic misidentification. You know, she thinks I'm that, and now I'm going to have to actually do a blessing, even though I'm not a vicar. Anyway, Nigel.
None better, Margaret. None the wiser, Betty. I think words I've actually taken from the special words that she obviously used with the flock. She attended and shepherded Betty's flock before attending to her own. I thought it was the only bit when she said that she might have to go off and administer her own flock. I thought she is gilding for shepherding Lily here. But it was one of those things, and being a vicar's daughter, it did come in handy. And it was just one of those stories that got away from her. It must have got a bit of a shock when she went round and Betty was laid out in the front room, but I think she did a pretty good job of it. So you are, Margaret, absolutely forgiven. Well, maybe you should think of taking up orders.
Yeah, well, maybe. Well played, Sister Margaret. Maybe.
Yes.
You know, it's
surely this is a case of no harm, no cowl.
Oh,
Boom!
you got there first!
Got in there straight away. She could have come clean, but then it wouldn't have been a decent story, would it? There'd have been no story if she'd come clean. She wouldn't have written to us.
Do you think people are actually doing these things now just so that they can get a confession out of it?
Yes, I think so.
Oh, okay.
I think that's why people are misbehaving. So I'm going to forgive, because obviously everyone was happy out of the end of this, and even that being the vicar's daughter finally paid off for Margaret, not your real name. So well done, everyone involved.
I did think somehow you'd make it Betty's fault somehow. But
yeah, why not? Yeah, actually, yes, it's all Betty's fault.